parents started a company together. What's the cost of just China's theft of IP to the US economy on an annualized basis? 250 to 600 billion per year. Dream come true for me. I mean, this is like what I feel is my mission. You know, Eric and I relocated to Utah about 3 years ago, and this is now like Strider's headquarters. When I was living in DC, a lot of the people I met were from Utah. So he was in Oman, in the Middle East. This is not a normal startup story at all. That was when, you know, we said, let's just do this. With three weeks later, we had a term sheet for $2 million on the idea. And that was the frustration I had in some of these interactions when I was supporting the government. You know, that first $2 million seed check bought us 1 year of time. Having the plan is what saved us.
Yeah.
The startup scene here and the talent base, I think is tremendous. Kind of like the what if conversation. I have a lot more of those in Utah. It is different than the rest of the country.
What is up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Small Lake City Podcast. I'm your host, Eric Nilsson, and today we have the CEO of Strider Technologies, Greg Levesque, to talk about his story of growing up in rural Maine and then moving west when his family wanted to start a company and following his dad to chase that dream, to attending Utah State and then eventually moving to DC, learning a ton about the international conflict between China and the U.S., which led him to found the company to help companies better combat those risks. We talk a lot about international relations, what's going on right now, and what his company is doing to combat it, as well as why he decided with his twin brother, who also helped founded the company, to move headquarters to Utah and in Salt Lake, and why they're excited to do so. So great conversation between the two of us. Excited for you all to listen and enjoy. Recording's my favorite part. Like editing is a grab bag. Usually not, because I'm usually stressed to try to get it done. Because I usually do it like Friday afternoons to have it ready by Saturday. And usually it's like, okay, no, just kidding, we're doing it on Saturday.
Right.
Sorry, everybody. And there's only been one time someone's texted me or messaged me, been like, it's not live.
Right. And you do it every week?
Every week, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, first start off as bi-weekly, and then the problem was I recorded the first episode July 26th last year, and I launched that episode on October 20th.
Okay.
And so, I mean, like 4-ish months.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, wait a minute, there's an issue if these things get stale. And so all of a sudden I'm like, all right, so we're going to release every week now.
Yeah.
And then once I got in kind of the cadence of it, I was like, this is fine. Like I can keep, and I'm really good about consistency. Like I've gone to the gym 5-6 days a week for the past 10 years. So as soon as I get in the rhythm, I can just keep on doing it. So it just keeps going. You
have discipline, which is a lost art.
It depends on the topic. You put me in a 7-Eleven candy aisle, and that discipline goes out the window. Yeah. And then I'm like the snack king. I always tell people, my biggest vice is sugar, and I don't know how to get rid of it. But if that's the worst thing that happens, then we'll just take being pre-diabetic for a little bit.
That's the worst that can happen.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, I mean, Greg, I'm stoked to be here. I kind of love, it's always funny because when I reach out to a lot of people, they'll always come back with this quick apology, being like, hey, my schedule's crazy. We'll try to get something scheduled. I don't know when we can. I'm like, listen, I've dealt with so many schedules. If we just need to keep perpetually kicking it down the field, that's fine. As long as you do want to be on it and we can make this happen, then that's fine. I mean, schedules come up, especially in, a role like yours. And working in tech and such high growth and being the captain at the helm, there's a lot of responsibilities and a lot of things that come up. So I'm glad that we could finally make it work.
Yeah, I am too. And, it was supposed to be me and Eric.
Yeah.
So you have a hedge, right? With the schedule. So Eric did get, called off to San Francisco. He had to go, but I'm here. So half of the twin duo.
Yeah.
Right. But
it's okay. There's only room in this room for one Eric, and I will take that. I'll take the high land on it.
Perfect.
But yeah, kind of like I was saying when we were walking in is I wanted to have more people. Silicon Slopes, because there's a lot of great entrepreneurs, a lot of great stories that I wanted to highlight, and so naturally I go to. As Scott Paul has coined him, and I've since reached out to the mod father, Blake Motorzitsky.
Yep.
And I was like, Blake, who do I need to have on the podcast? Whose story do I have? And it was funny because Blake's a very busy person. Mm-hmm. And it was funny because he responded pretty quickly, and it was very oh, Greg and Eric for Strider. That's the one. I'm like, okay, would you mind an intro email? He's like, yeah. And again, 5 minutes later, hey, here you guys are, take it from here.
Yeah.
And in very typical Blake email fashion,
totally.
All right, thank you, on it. And And so it's like if you have his stamp of approval, that alone made me excited to sit down and record. And obviously, like Eric can't be here, but maybe there's going to be some of the twin ESP telepathy.
It'll come out.
Exactly. He'll be in a meeting in San Francisco, be like, why do I feel like I need to like think about my origin story and growing up?
I mean, this is the odd thing. Like, so we took totally different career paths. Eric went to Wall Street, did finance. I went to DC, got sucked into that vortex.
Yeah.
And, for 10 years, we were on our own paths. Obviously, we always kept in touch, would talk about things. But it wasn't until we started Strider that we kind of came back together and realized, yeah, we are not that unique.
We are people.
We are the same person. So, back to like comments about, having the same thoughts and things like that. Like there's been some fun times in the startup journey where that's like that twin dynamic has like been on display for everybody to see.
Yeah. They're like, wait, are you sure this is Greg or Eric? I really don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, especially and I always applaud anybody who can work with family like that. Like, I love my family. My sister's one of my best friends, but the thought of being like, hey, I have this idea for this opportunity in the marketplace that really hasn't been addressed, and I think we should do this together.
Yeah. I mean, that kind of comes with like my own immediate family's like background. My parents started a company together.
What kind of company was it?
So they did Medicaid billing for school districts.
Okay.
So they built a software and then a consultancy around that.
Of course.
And then my two older brothers started a legal tech company together.
Well, what?
It's called Lolly Law.
Oh, okay.
And that was acquired by Francisco Partners a couple of years ago. And then Eric and I did this. So
it was almost expected.
Well, I think we just have a very, maybe we just can't work in a normal corporate environment.
How dare you be so sane? I've yet to meet someone who's like, I really found myself in this corporate rat race and this climb to the top. It really resonated with who I am as a person. And if I did hear someone say that, I would probably run as fast as I could. Not to say like, I mean, jobs are great. There's a lot of fulfillment, a lot of community that can come from work. But at the end of the day, I think it is these like projects that you get to build on your own. You get to have your own experience and learn so much along the way. And it's remarkable to have a brother and a twin who's like, hey, like, I'm in it too. And I think it's interesting to think about your guys' diversities yet similarities that come together. Because I was talking to someone yesterday about it at this event I was at for 801 Day and that CityCast Salt Lake was hosting with their partnership with Second Summit Cider. Shout out to them and all that they've done. But it's funny because like some people will come together and try to start a business, project, organization, whatever it might be, but they're all the same people. And so as you're thinking like, hey, different things have to get done. And if we're all the same person, we all want to do the same thing, but we all have to do different things. And if we do different things, it's either this learning process or really not as successful as you like it to be.
Look, I mean, I think this is why you get some of those familial dynamics at play and why it sometimes doesn't work out, especially in venture. Like if you're going to do a venture-backed tech company, which Strider is, right? You're going to get asked, should I invest in this family out of the gate, right? And we got that. I mean, I remember when we were raising for our Series A, we had an investor say, look, we don't really like investing in sibling businesses or husband-wife businesses. They, tend to go sideways, et cetera. And he's like, can you give me some examples of ones that have worked? And I looked at him and I said, well, have you heard of like the Rothschilds or the Kochs or, you just go down the list and there's all of these very institutionalized family businesses. And there is something unique about them.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's not to say that they're all going to work, but there is some uniqueness to if you can get it right. And Eric and I call it like the Bob. So if there's somebody who, when you start a business, shares a lot of those skills with some of the other founders over time, as if that business succeeds and it scales, that person's kind of left standing there going like, what's my role? Where do I fit in this organization? And we would joke that's the Bob. And that's where a lot of the family dynamics will then kind of rear their heads because it becomes emotional rather than just saying, what are the skill sets we need to operate this business, scale it, and get it to where we want it to be? So we thought a lot about that. I think that's why this works for me and Eric is because we don't kind of fill the same Venn diagram. He covers and has expertise and skills that I didn't develop.
Good old mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive at play.
There you go. Exactly. So it's a nice, well-rounded dynamic.
No, I love that. And And I guess maybe before we kind of jump into the beginning and starting of it all, I mean, maybe give a quick introduction to Strider. I mean, what it does and a little bit more of the products, and then we can kind of come back to kind of what you're up to and more of the future a little later.
Yeah. So Strider, we're a little over 5 years old. Started the business back in 2019. And originally, we were really focused on solving a pretty sticky problem, which was foreign nation states stealing IP from, specifically U.S. companies. That was an area of work that I had spent quite a bit of time on in D.C. I'm a Mandarin linguist, and realized, look, our system here in the United States just is not responding effectively to countering that threat. And the real kind of aha moment was I was part of the U.S. Trade Rep 301 investigation back in 2016, 17. This was basically like the legal foundation for tariffs and implementing some new policies around U.S. China trade
Got it.
dynamic. And there were some economists on that team. Their job was to peg what's the cost of just China's theft of IP to the U.S. economy on an annualized basis. And they came up with 250 to 600 billion per year.
Like, and there's my TAM.
Right. So I kind of sat there and I was like, and this is happening every year. And then somebody raised their hand in the room. And this is when this was that moment, right? For me, I was like, we have to go figure this out.
Yeah.
Because somebody asked, well, that is so much. How did they do it? And it was crickets. We just kind of looked at each other. And that's when, I had this thought, like, we know how they do it. This is a system. We can actually model this out. We can identify it. We can begin to implement new policies, and we can collect data to actually flag this for companies so they can protect themselves. And that was the genesis for Strider, and that's what we've built today.
No, it's super impressive. I mean, especially anybody who's willing to jump into and start a business that deals with the government and some sort of government contracting. That B is going to say, hey, I'm going to put myself in the middle of the U.S. and China. Like that alone deserves kudos and applause. And I mean, especially, going on 5 years now, chipping away at that TAM. And I mean, obviously we kind of touched on this when we were walking around, but something that really does cause fulfillment, because there's so many people that work at companies. It's like, oh, like, I don't really care about like auto insurance, or, the list can go on and on and on about the company you do and like what it actually does and how it actually improves lives or your own life. But to say, hey, listen, I'm trying to make this a better place for the U.S. economy, to help entrepreneurs, try to keep the bad guys out, keep the good guys in, and really help make that succeed. That's got to be a great place to find in that intersectionality of it all.
It's a dream come true for me. This is like what I feel is my mission, right? And what I'm like, oriented to do right now. The journey here was like not a linear progression.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't go to school for this, right?
It's never it's not a linear progression.
I'm going to tell everybody it's non-linear.
Shocker.
But to your earlier point, like I think I was always looking for not just a job, but like an adventure.
Ooh.
And I got a lot of that in DC. I met some amazing people. They brought me into different projects and career opportunities that really helped to like fulfill that desire to be part of something meaningful,
mm-hmm.
and not just to do a job.
Yeah.
At the same time, it was a struggle to get there, and I think took a lot of different twists and turns. But ultimately, I came to the realization that idea I had in my head of what I wanted my career to be, and blend it with my life purpose as well. I had to create it. Mm-hmm. It wasn't going to be created for me. And I was just on the hunt for that moment and that opportunity. And then it kind of crystallized, came together, and we jumped in with both feet and burned the boat, so to speak. And look, we'll get into this maybe in a little bit, but it was not a foregone conclusion that this was going to work.
Never is. There's never 100% certainty anything's going to work.
And, like many other entrepreneurs, like most people said it wouldn't. And so you kind of have to get through that. I also had a 4-month-old. I had another business we had launched, had to, extract myself from that. So there was all of these kind of impediments there, but ultimately, when you saw the opportunity, when the pieces came together, and then to do this with my twin brother, that's a moment in your life where you go, I'm going to give these dice a roll,
Totally.
and let's just jump in and see what happens.
Yeah. Because again, you could talk yourself out of it so quickly. Like I'm an overthinker. And so if there's something to do, I'm like, Paul, if this happens, kind of going to like catastrophe chain. And that goes with anything. I mean, it could be the best idea, but you'd be like, well, I don't know if I have the time, or this could be hard. I've never done this. But it really is the people that are like, you know what? I don't know what's going to happen. I think I have a good idea. I have a pretty good hypothesis about it. And it feels not only that, but it feels good. Here we go.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, as you can probably attest, you start to get like work down that field, or like just keep moving the ball down. And you're like, oh, this only feels better. It doesn't feel worse.
Yeah.
And start to go from there. But yeah, I mean, let's go to the beginning. I mean, I'm curious about, because obviously you have family, I mean, parents that were entrepreneurs, especially in like the tech space. I mean, family dynamics like growing up? Where were you growing up? I mean, especially with your twin brother.
So we're not from Utah.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in Augusta, Maine.
Okay.
So my grandfather on my father's side's from Canada, from Quebec. We have a pretty traditional like Quebecois move to Maine, worked in the lumber mill family story.
Yeah.
My parents raised 5 boys on 11 acres in Maine. My mom was a nurse. My father was a school administrator, and really just created I think a pretty idyllic life. Now that I have my own children, I realized they moved us to the middle of the woods because having 5 boys in society was probably too much. So
Yeah.
let's just take these wild things into the.
Just go out and get it all out. Come back whenever.
Exactly.
As long as you're not hungry or starve or get eaten by wildlife.
Yeah. But when I was a sophomore in high school, our father came home one day and said, "I've quit my job. I want to start a business, and we're going to move to Idaho."
What was your thought when you said that? I mean, was it the teenage, like, you can't take me from my friends, I'm not doing this? Or, I mean, were you excited? What were those initial emotions like?
I think it was back to like that whole adventure. Like, I think we just viewed it as a grand adventure. Obviously, like missed friends and family that had still lived there, but I think as a family, we came together and said, "Look, we want to support our father in this endeavor, and kind of make the most of it."
Yeah.
And so it was definitely a culture shock moving from Maine to Idaho.
Yeah. A little different.
Yeah, but it worked out, and it got us out west, which I fell in love with, the Mountain West in particular, and then we've loved it out here ever since.
I mean, in your childhood, I mean, obviously you have this, I mean, vast expanse to go do and play and explore. And like, I had a taste of that from where I grew up in Salt Lake. But I mean, during this time, I mean, what was your relationship with your brother? I mean, was it like this twins attached at the hip, or was it get away from me? And I don't want to spend too much time with my twin brother.
We've always been best friends.
Okay.
Yeah. So if maybe you have some of those twin dynamics where it's like friend and foe, but for us, we've always just been very tight knit.
Good.
And until, like I mentioned, until we went on LDS missions, I mean, our paths were in lockstep.
Yeah. Okay. So you moved to, what part of Idaho did you guys move to?
So we moved to Kuna, Idaho.
Oh, wow.
Farm country.
Yeah.
And yeah, I went to the high school and orientation, and they said, would you like to take welding courses or animal husbandry? And I said, what the hell is that? Do you have economics or anything? Like,
what are the normal topics? Can I do math?
Yeah.
Please tell me we still get gym. You're like, no, we actually have rodeo practice.
Yeah. But what a wonderful community.
Yeah.
And we fell in love with it and jumped in with both feet. My parents now live in Boise. And it's just been a great transition for the family because, look, Maine's a wonderful place, but the running joke there when I was growing up even was Maine's biggest export is its youth. Like there's just not a lot happening on the economy front. And, my dad would always make these comments like, we're driving around and on the license plate, the motto is vacation land. But what about all the people who have to live here?
Yeah, you can't vacation here too. Unless you're unemployed, then it's always vacation land.
Exactly.
But I mean, that's one thing that I truly do appreciate about Salt Lake specifically. So, I mean, as you may have heard in episodes, like I spent 6 months traveling around the country, and like part of the impetus for that, for like, I'm going to find the place I want to be. I'm going to fall in love with it, buy a house, set up like shop and ride off into the sunset. But what I found is a lot of exactly like what you said. I mean, there's a lot of places, I mean, parts of Pennsylvania, I mean, Maine, I mean, every state has a part of it. I mean, even Ohio and a lot of the Midwest where there's really not a lot going on the economic front. And you
Right.
see a lot of unemployment, you see a lot of like rundown buildings and not a lot of optimism. And I mean, even in places that's beautiful and amazing as Maine, there's still not that much going on. I mean, you can love Acadia National Park and go to as
Right.
many weddings at Kennebunkport as you want to, but if there isn't jobs, if there isn't a lot of growth, it really isn't too much opportunity for, I mean, kids, next generation. I mean,
Yeah.
especially thinking about your dad's situation. He's like, yeah, like let's go try something new and let's go out here and do that. And that's one thing that I truly do love about Salt Lake and what's been going on because I mean, there's always the sentiment of, I mean, just taking everything for granted if you're from here,
Hmm.
from nature to the people to the cleanliness of the city, but also like the economic growth, because it didn't always used to be this way in like the 80s and early 90s until really like Larry H. Miller came in and really had this like this drive to create this economic engine. And then now we've seen so many versions of this. I mean, in Silicon Slopes, and I mean everything that's going on in Lehigh and around there has really been this new kind of foundation to fuel a lot of this growth. And I mean, and it led to a lot of other companies. I mean, like Golden has set up a pretty meaningful shop.
Yeah.
And we see these bigger and bigger companies be like, oh, like, yeah, we'll put a small office here, medium office, big office. And then, yeah, it's hard not to align with, especially as we look at this work from remote culture that's shaped. I mean, it's hard not to look at a lot of these key areas, especially on the West Coast or, I mean, Rocky Mountain area and not want to be a part of it.
I couldn't agree more. Like, that was the drive for us to get out here about 3 years ago. So, Eric and I relocated to Utah about 3 years ago, and this is now like Strider's headquarters.
Yeah.
But up until then, I mean, it was in Virginia, right outside of DC, and our thinking was, where can we create a hub for the business that allows our employees to have a bit of a Western presence, a work-life balance, tap into a different engineering and talent base.
Yeah.
But more also, when I was living in DC, a lot of the people I met were from Utah.
Hmm.
Shocking, right?
Right.
Okay, but like within the intelligence community, within the government, there's a lot of folks who served on missions, speak multiple languages, and all of us had like this desire to come back
Yeah.
at some point. But it was pretty hard to find something that was a parallel on the career path from an intelligence community or national security perspective until now.
Yeah.
Now, like the defense tech hub here is growing rapidly. Governor Cox and the state are backing 47G, which is a new consortium that's being built around the defense tech ecosystem and helping to just kind of drive that forward in a more coordinated way, which is great for the state. It's great for the employees here. It's going to attract a lot of talent. But more importantly, what I love about it is it's going to be good for our country and actually contribute to a grander mission, because we are in a geopolitical flux right now.
Yeah.
And that's just a fact, given what's going on in the world. And I fundamentally believe national security is not just a government problem. It's a collective issue, and we need to engage all pieces of our society across academia, business, to really tackle these problems that we're confronting, because those geopolitical confrontations are happening across the spectrum.
Yeah. I mean, and it's so many issues that we've never faced before. I mean, especially when we look at, I mean, how sometimes a lot of the government, especially Congress, like looks at tech, and there's definitely this disconnect between understanding fundamentally how it works and how to use it as a tool to really solve a lot of our issues. And I mean, yeah, I mean, like even like thinking about the economics of Utah, I mean, the more that we can diversify that, the more strength that we can have moving forward. Because if we put all of our bets in tech, then and we have, I mean, an economic downturn, rates
Right.
increase, and then all of a sudden it's like, ooh, sorry about that. Like maybe back to the drawing board. Um, and I do want to come back to DC because that's like an interesting one. But I want to go back to so you and your brother attached to the hip, and you guys go on missions. Where did you go?
So I went to Taipei, Taiwan.
That makes sense from the
That's
Mandarin
where
side.
Mandarin. Eric went to the Ural Mountain region of Russia.
Oof. So you guys just get the perp like, yeah, you go learn Russian, I'll go learn Mandarin,
Yeah.
and that'll come back to the narrative eventually.
Yeah, who would have thought?
Yeah.
I certainly didn't see it at the time, but
No,
it's worked out in a really unique way.
totally.
So yeah.
Because you come and then you come back, and I believe you went to Utah State, correct?
So we got back from our missions, and you're in that kind of like mission mindset. So we got home. my mother said, "Hey, I applied to 2 colleges for you guys, and you got into both. Congratulations!" And we're like, "Well, which ones?
Yeah.
What are you talking about?" Like, I
It
thought.
doesn't even say.
And she said, "You can go to Boise State or Utah State." And I kind of looked around and I said, "Well, Utah State, I guess, sounds better." So, by the way, I had gone to Boise State for 1 year prior
Oh,
to
okay. Got
finishing.
it.
So also it was just like I wanted to, go live away, not
Yeah.
be a commuter from my home and my parents' home in Idaho. And so we went to Utah State and got into the Huntsman School and had just a wonderful experience and loved it. And that was our first time living in Utah. So spent 3 years at Utah State, met my wife, and then we moved to DC.
Yeah, my sister went to Utah State. I went to the U, but she played soccer up there. And I never like because at first I would go to her games up there, and be like, "Oh, this is stupid," a farm country, Utah, Logan, Utah. But then as had my college experience compared to other people's, like I always get envious of like the college experience
Yes.
where everything that's going on in this town happens to be around it. Most people are students, and there's such a fun community around it. Because like when I went to the U, it was a great experience. I love my time. I was there kind of right after they joined the Pac-12. So there's a lot of people from out of state coming in. I joined a fraternity because when you go to the U and you're from Salt Lake and you don't do anything different, it kind of tends to be this continuation of high school. It's
Sure.
like same friends, same everything. And I knew I didn't want to do that. And so took that decision in my own hand, joined a fraternity, made amazing friends there that are still some of my best friends today. But there's part of me that's still envious of like, oh, cool, we're all in this new place. No one's really from here. We all want to make friends. And it creates this kind of, ecosystem of just like social adventure
Yeah.
and getting to know so many people in such a unique way. So I'm envious of that experience and glad that it was a positive one because I've only heard
It
similar
was a
things.
blast. I mean, like the opportunities now for the students there too are like way beyond anything I had, which is just testament to the leadership at the university, the
Definitely.
investments that they're making, and helping to put Utah State on the map for, financial services opportunities in New York. I mean, Eric literally hopped on a plane, flew to New York himself, and just like hustled to get his first job there. And now, I mean, I'm getting hit up by students who want to be mentored, and I'm looking at their internships, and I was like, I don't even know how you got into these. This is amazing.
Yeah.
Like, kudos to you guys, right? Like, so I think I'm very bullish on Utah State and where that institution is going. And for me, it was you can go and learn Mandarin, right? You can have these ambitions, but you need kind of a foundation and some of this support network to help get you launched,
Yeah.
right? Especially when you're looking for your first job. And that network for Utah State for me was just a massive support. And it still is to this day.
Mhm.
I mean, we've hired a number of folks that I met from undergrad at Strider who are now in leadership roles and just crushing it.
Yeah.
And to your point, it's just building out that community and team.
Mhm.
And then taking them with you in your journey over time.
Yeah, it's funny how that's actually happened because I remember because I studied finance at the U, and it's funny now because I graduated 7 years ago, and it's fun to see. I'll see LinkedIn updates, whatever, and I'll be like, oh, like everyone's doing like cool things, and like some people have come back, and there's network opportunities, job interviews, whatever. So I've worked with some others, but it is fun, and like especially like you alluded to is there's a lot of people who go to college with this goal. And their goal, whether it's like, I want to be a 4.0, I want to get into this major, I want to graduate with this. And oftentimes you're so hyper focused on this task at hand because, again, like all of high school is preparing to get you into college. You go to college, you have these majors and you're around everybody, and everybody kind of has this goal to do as well as possible in this like small ecosystem. But one thing that's really hard for people is to connect that to the next step.
Yeah.
And that's one thing I didn't appreciate as much at the time. But now in hindsight, I can see that because there's so many opportunities and resources to be like, oh, like, here's what you're studying. Here's some opportunities for this. Here's how we can connect you with that. And you kind of think of it's like just part of like their jobs and what they can do. But then when you compare that to what other schools can do and connecting that, it's priceless. And like you can be like your brother and go fly to New York every week, have a 30-minute meetings every 30 minutes, trying to like just get that interview. And like, that's great. But if you don't have a little bit of help, that little bit of help can go so far.
Makes all the difference.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it makes all the difference is having that like team mentality.
Definitely. So you meet your wife at Utah State and you guys take off to DC. And at this point in your life, where did you see your life going? Did you just want to be one of those DC suits walking around. I mean, because I interned in DC
Okay.
for a summer. I was at the Treasury. It was one of the most boring internships of my life. I did nothing. They always said if you're not doing anything by 3, you can go home. I went home at 3 every day except for one.
Nice.
But it was fun because I got to see so much of DC because you
Right.
like there's definitely like this energy and there's always just kind of like this pace that's always moving and very different than kind of like a New York finance pace. But there is a lot going on and it's fun to be part of that energy. So I assume, I mean, you go there and I mean, it becomes addictive. Well, not addictive, but you kind of feel that and want to be a part of
I
it.
call it the vortex. Like you just kind of get
Fair.
sucked in.
Yeah.
And, there's what Harry Truman called it Potomac fever, right? Like, DC is a happening place. There's a lot going on. It's exciting if you like that intellectual, engagement. And obviously, if you want to nerd out on policy, national security, if you want to attend a bunch of like think tank events, that's the hub to do it.
Yeah.
Right. And so, I mean, look, the original plan was go to grad school. So that's what we went there for.
Cool.
And then ended up sticking around for 10 years. Right, which was not the plan.
Yeah.
But it just kind of continued to happen. My wife worked for the executive branch, and I always wanted to work in national security or around a national security nexus.
Yeah.
But I didn't necessarily want to go into government. So that was a bit of a straddling, place I found myself. And what ended up happening was just through some of the work I was doing on the commercial side, caught the attention of some folks in DoD, and then began collaborating with them to better understand what was happening in the economy from a national security perspective. And so at that time, it was if you can recall, like there was a big shift in China policy.
Yeah.
And that was actually, really architected by a guy named Matt Pottinger, who lives here in Utah now, and was on the National Security Council. And really, I think it's been an important shift. But what a core part of that was missing from the discussion was, well, what is their strategy for undermining the United States, acquiring technologies to rapidly advance their military capabilities, and shocker, I mean, the U.S. economy is the engine for innovation. And what we are seeing is just a massive movement to target industry and non-traditional sectors as a way to gain a geopolitical advantage.
Yeah.
This is something like nation states used to do, right? I mean, you can think of the East India Company as a good example of that in history. We've kind of lost the art. If you look back at Eisenhower administration, Truman administration, National Security Council memos, I mean, they talk about this. How do we use our economy to achieve objective A? What industries do we need to, invest in and ramp up so that we can better engage with third countries in Latin America or Africa, right? Like there was always this kind of lens that we had when we looked at our comprehensive national strategy that does not really exist anymore.
No.
I think we're seeing embers of it reemerge out of necessity. So semiconductors is a good one, right?
Yeah.
The CHIPS Act, and now we're pumping billions of dollars into that industry. That's a reflection of the stresses of that competition.
Yeah. And I think it's become a lot more of a reactive motion than
Yeah.
it has been a proactive motion. Because again, I mean, we look at, I mean, those former administrations and kind of like these hallmark events. I mean, it was top of mind. I mean, even like think about the Cold War and JFK and so much sentiment around it, so much worry. I mean, it was palpable around the entire country. And then now, I mean, call it, I mean, everyone's so caught up in the humdrum of life and there's so many things that we're distracted by that it kind of gets lost in it. But at the end of the day, like that overarching theme is still there. Just the tactics employed and the logistics of executing it have changed so much. And I mean, again, it's just like the world today. I mean, technology keeps growing at a faster and faster rate that we have to be able to be prepared at a more and more fast rate in order to be there. And we are caught on our heels.
Right. No, I think you're spot on. Like we are in a reactive posture. And this is one of the frustrating things that I look out across, not just the United States. I think this is emblematic across the West and is likely due to probably some of the lingering of these institutions that were really created post World War II,
Mhm.
and don't quite have the fit and finish of the modern era we live in.
Yes.
So speed is not a strength that those institutions have. Outlining and executing a vision, not necessarily in the wheelhouse right now. It's very much just like managing the status quo, addressing emergencies or crises as they emerge, and fundamentally, like, we need to begin to change that. And I think it's going to be industry that changes that,
Yeah.
that drives that shift.
Well, I mean, I think you hit it on the head, especially when you think about, I mean, the slow cruise ship that is the government and being able to execute on so many things. But to that point, that dovetails so well with like the private sector and what we're able to do as a country, because that is where we can move fast because of our innovation,
Yep.
because of our growth, because of, I mean, the capitalistic engine that drives it. I mean, if there is opportunity, someone can take advantage of that. And then next thing you know, you're a government contractor and doing so much of the lifting. Obviously that's just so much of what your impetus for starting Strider and getting there. But then I know you're in DC, you go to Georgetown and get your master's, you get kind of caught into this vortex that is DC. And I know before Strider, there was, I mean, some other steps, started a company. I mean, what was that company and what got you to start that?
So that was just part of developing a way to better engage with some of the government customers we had, and what we were trying to do with industry to help folks better understand the dynamics at play when they were engaged in business relationships with foreign companies.
Cool.
And so it was a boutique research shop. Most of what we did was manual in nature, a lot of open source research, and would then deliver those in reports and things like that to the government or to corporate customers. Geopolitical advisory and research. That's
cool.
what we were doing, and loved it. Had a blast. I would call that like a bit of training ground.
Yeah.
Right, a front row seat into that China policy shift that I had mentioned, and was a wonderful experience. Got to meet some amazing people that don't really get a lot of attention, that are protecting our country and doing that day in and day out, which was a world that I had not been introduced to previously.
And I think that's an interesting thing that people need to understand is like there's so much of the government politics DC that is a face of everything. It's a lot of elected officials, a lot of media training, a
Yeah.
lot of diverging. But like even in my experience at the Treasury, because there was so the person I worked under was the deputy CFO of of risk and manage. I can't remember anyway. Blah blah blah. And she was not an elected official. She got her position. She did everything behind the scenes and never got that face. But then there's like the elected position that I think it was just like the CFO, and then they're the ones on camera. They're the ones
Yeah.
in all like the sexy meetings and yada yada yada. And I think it's interesting to see those people behind the scenes because you could go meet the face of it and be like, oh, like I think you're actually just a face.
Yeah.
Like, there's not that much depth here, and you just kind of are a really elegant speaker and be able to do it. But there's this engine behind them of supporting them getting things done that is usually it's almost like a Wizard of Oz, the man behind the curtain.
Yeah. I mean, look, we have an elite national security apparatus in our country, and I think that's, for a whole host of reasons, not necessarily discussed publicly, but the people that I've met are what make that elite, and their sense of mission, their love for country, and the sacrifices they make. I wish they got more like airtime.
Yeah.
I wish that more people knew about it, because I think it would change our perspective. I think it would fundamentally change how we view parts of government. There's certainly areas that need changing, right? But as far as that national security group is concerned, I think they are as proactive as they can be. They do a lot of things under the radar that help protect us every single day, both domestically and internationally, and that's going to be critical to our long-term competitiveness, and really for us to continue to realize the dreams and visions that we have, whether that's around building a technology or business, or being able to say and worship how you see fit. I really fundamentally believe like we are beginning to confront an ideological battle, right? And China is kind of the main competitor in that arena, but you're seeing now coordination and collaboration with Russia, with Iran and their proxies, and now North Korea is in that mix as well. So Look, I don't get too hyperbolic or fear mongering. That's not my kind of style.
Nothing's as good as it seems. Nothing's as bad as it
Right.
seems.
But it's a challenge, and it's one that we have not really confronted for a very long time.
Yeah.
And so the question becomes, well, how do you confront it? What is the role of industry? What should the government be doing? Should it be reacting? Should it be more proactive? And that's I think those are questions we're all going to need to struggle with, because the effect it's going to have, especially if things ramp up, I think could be profound.
Yeah. Gotta be ready for. There's a quote from, I think it was one of the last Die Hard movies, but I mean, again, it's like the world's going to shit, and the guy who's Bruce Willis's boss, he's like, hope for the best, plan for the worst.
Yeah.
And because again, like, we don't want to be too hyperbolic and thinking everything's going to go wrong and the sky's falling. But at the same time, it's like, but if that happens, we got to have something in our back pocket ready to go because we don't want to be caught on our heels even more.
Yeah. I like listening to a Billy Joel song, "We Didn't Start the Fire." Like, I'm listening to that a lot now. It's
Just on loop every day.
It seems like, okay, that's happening now, actually. You can feel like it's heating up.
Yeah.
Right. And then where that goes, time will tell. But I think we can all see, like, it's getting hot.
Yeah, we're all strapped in. Keep your arms and legs in the vehicle at all times.
Yes.
Cool. So you're doing. I mean, essentially, like, I think you hit it on the head. Like, you're collecting so much information. You're having conversations with the right people. You have these right mentors to really have, I mean, a front row seat of what's going on and be part of these think tanks to really understand, have a seat at the table until there's a conversation at the seat of the table of like, yeah, we really don't know how to think about, I mean, all of this, manage this risk, and you're like, oh, here's this opportunity. I mean, at what point do you call Eric or like, hey, I got this idea. Are you interested? Would love to hear kind of more about, I mean, those first steps to actually get it off the ground.
So Eric and I have been chatting for years.
And was he still in Wall Street doing finance
So
stuff?
he was in Oman, in the Middle East.
Oh.
So he was working for the Sovereign Wealth Fund in Oman, and was actually seeing in practice some of the stuff that I was working on. Just given, I mean, look, at the time, Oman is a strategically located country in the Middle East. Access to the
Don't ask me to point it on a map. I could not do
okay.
it.
But it's I mean, look, there's not a lot going on there, but it's very strategic, and from a like geographical perspective, there's a lot of Russian and delegations from China coming through to strike G to G, government to government, like business deals. So think building massive oil refineries, ports, things like that. And at that time, I was actually digging into this and looking at how China was building out this massive infrastructure program globally. They called it the One Belt, One Road program. And this was part of it. So what he was seeing tactically on the ground and in having conversations with, I was actually trying to understand it, map it out. It was just this
normal family dinner conversations.
Totally. And that was when we said, hey, look, if this is happening in Oman, this is happening everywhere, right? Like there's a problem here. And the problem was information asymmetry, right? Like the counterparty really was viewing that as a commercial transaction, whereas on the China side, the Russia side, it was strategic. But we missed, like, what's their strategy? What's the point of this port within that broader effort? And that's what I was building at. So that was when we decided, like, okay, we think there's an opportunity here. And this is not a normal startup story at all. I mean, Eric was in DC.
No garage involved.
No garage, but we did have a really bad office with bugs flying around at one point. But that was when, we said, let's just do this. Okay. And we actually were at the Silicon Slopes event, the annual event. And we just kind of looked at each other and said, like, it's time to move out. Let's figure it out and put a plan together. Eric then went and met with a guy named Mike Jenke. So Mike is a former Navy SEAL, SEAL Team 6, multi-time founder and CEO, and then had started his own startup fund called Data Tribe. And Eric, just kind of in passing, said, hey, my brother and I are thinking of this idea. Here's kind of like the nuts and bolts of what it would be. And it was an immediate mind meld. With three weeks later, we had a term sheet for $2 million on the idea. It was one of those things where, that's you don't get funded on ideas anymore.
Right.
That was one example where we did. And then we had to go prove it out. And and figure out how to make it work. But I think we had a lot of pieces going for us. So there's a number of developments that have happened that have made Strider viable today. If we had tried to do this 10 years ago, it would not have worked. One of them is data. The amount of publicly available data is growing at a parabolic rate. And that was turbocharged during COVID.
Yeah.
So, I mean, when everybody went remote, the amount of information pushed online just went, I mean, it was exponential. That has not slowed down at all. And so when you think about what we're doing and the opportunity, you have a convergence of factors here. You have a geopolitical moment and a problem that requires a massive trove of data to begin to unpack. You have this data revolution, you could argue, happening in open source. And then you have AI to begin to process all of that at scale and extract high value insights. So combining those things together, we've developed a very unique capability that rapidly reduces the analytical processing time of that data, which I used to do manually. For 10 years, we did this manually. I mean, it was like combing through reams of data and trying to figure out like, okay, is that name the same person that I saw in these other 5 documents? And then trying to link them all up. And while it's intellectually stimulating, right? Like at some point in time, you got to say, well, what's the point of this and what are we going to do with it? And that was the frustration I had in some of these interactions when I was supporting the government, was a lot of time and effort went into building these capabilities and identifying what was going on. And then it was difficult to get action from it. And that's I think where, what we're doing at Strider, the whole point is about being proactive. It's about understanding the threat and then moving out on it, not just waiting for something bad to happen and then figuring it out.
Yeah. Because I mean, it's so interesting to hear because again, like you have someone like what Mike Jenke was saying?
Yeah, Mike.
Someone who gets it because he's so involved would be like, yep, I'm in, here's your check, here's your term sheet, excited to work with you. Which again, like, I mean, so much of this was a hypothesis that you had in conversations to call your brother and do this, but there's so many points along the way that you get this validation. And it's usually nice to be like, okay, so I'm not the only one. Because sometimes if you're like doing this all in a silo, you're like, am I crazy or is this working?
Oh yeah, there were many nights of just, staring up at the ceiling.
Where I was like, hey, listen, so is the money coming in yet? No? Great. Any idea?
To your point, I mean, like, look, you need people to believe in you, but
Yeah.
I mean, it is powerful if you just have a small crew that believes.
Oh yeah.
I mean, you're not going to ever get a majority out of the gate.
Never.
But we did. We had a small, tight-knit team that believed it, and we believed that we could do it together.
Yeah.
And then set about, working as hard as we could to prove it. And like I even joke with Eric now, like we all have a bit of a chip on our shoulder still, and I think that's healthy. It's motivating, but it's what got us to where we are, because I think to create something net new like this is it takes a lot of convincing. It also takes a lot of getting folks aligned on what's the end objective.
Yeah.
And sometimes when it's something that's net new, you don't have a playbook to follow.
No.
You don't have another model to look at and say, well, we could do it like that. So we tried to find other startups to look at and say, how did they do it? How did they think about it? What did they do right? What did they do wrong? We spent a lot of time just doing discovery and trying to get a handle on like, what's our path to success, and not try to go for the moon right out of the gate. It was, that first $2 million seed check bought us 1 year of time. And that's how we viewed it. We said, this money buys time. And during that time, we want to accomplish this, right? And here are our milestones for achieving that. And we developed an entire planning process. We call it milestone-driven planning, which was what's our end objective within that period of time, and then work backwards across every function of the business to develop that plan for those milestones over the calendar year.
Yeah.
And then it was like, okay, we're not going to hire anybody until we hit that milestone. Right. So I never wanted to do layoffs. I didn't want to come out of the gate.
I'd be worried if you did.
Right. I mean, like, but I think sometimes people get overly optimistic and they begin to plan a bit over their skis, especially in the early startup phase. Yeah. And then you run into this, you have to do layoffs or other things like that. So we decided we would just suffer.
We'll suffer now instead of potentially suffering later. Because I mean, I think that's exactly it. I mean, especially when you look at I mean, seed, Series A, Series B, there's so much of, I mean, especially once you get, I mean, a check, there is an expectation of, well, we do need to grow it. I mean, triple digits or, I mean, 4 or 5x over X amount of time in order to get that. So then we can get that next term sheet to get that next tranche of investors there. And I mean, alluding to what you said earlier about, I mean, in a day then where term sheets were given with, based on ideas, and that's, I mean, not the way it is now, where you saw these people, oh yeah, we can always get money. There's always going to be this, we can do whatever we need to. And then, I mean, in theory, like, yeah, you could be doing everything right, but over planning a little bit.
Yeah.
But then, I mean, again, like an external event, like interest rates changing and venture capital money drying up. And now all of a sudden cash matters, you don't have any, and good luck.
There you go. Yeah. I mean, you always have to have gunpowder, right?
Mhm.
That's kind of my mentality. And so, look, I always also too thought this is too important to mess up because you didn't get the business fundamentals right.
Yeah.
So, I would rather just take the Rome model brick by brick, right? Put the foundation together and delay some of that gratification. It's easy to get caught up in that venture startup like mindset
Yeah.
of success is the next funding round, right? And then I think that's not the best way to look at it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a means to an end.
Yeah.
And especially in those early days, the funding rounds are a means to buy more time. It's buy time to figure out your product, buy time to figure out product market fit, hone your messaging, build relationships. The tech can be amazing, but if you don't have the trust and relationships of real people on your customer side, your business is not going to scale.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important lesson that we learned out of the gate was we just spent the first year building out the tool, building out the network of people, finding folks who had a like-mindedness that said, look, your product's not quite there yet, but we believe in where you're going. And this is a problem that we have. So, we're going to purchase it and work with you guys to refine it. And that was critical to our early successes and building out what we have now achieved today.
I mean, especially if customers that believe in the vision, because if you have a customer who believes in product in current state and what the value can drive, as soon as they don't find value in that anymore, don't believe in you, and all of a sudden they're not getting what they want to, they're like, okay, we're out, we're going to go to something else, or we don't need this anymore. But to have people that catch that vision, be like, hey, we're in for the long term, we trust what you're going to do, like we're here. And it's nice to have them in partnership because, again, like if you're a customer, like, hey, like what, it's always nice to have those thought partners be like, hey, like, what do you need? What do you want?
Yeah.
And I mean, obviously you're never going to listen to them completely, because I always usually take the Steve Jobs approach of like, customers don't actually know what they want or like know what they need, and go that way compared to like more of the Bill Gates perspective. But and it's interesting too. I like what you said about the milestone planning, because it reminds me of, I mean, Atomic Habits, where if there's a goal that you want to accomplish, let's say if you want to lose 100 pounds by the end of the year, that's great. But until you have tactical plans of how to get it and how to actually be consistent on it and be, diligent about it, it doesn't matter. And so if you do have, all right, okay, listen, here's our North Star that we're going to circle around, put our hands in, we're going to do it. We've come up with a plan to get there. Again, we've all put our hands in and worked around to it. Now there's no confusion, because again, you can always go back to be like, oh, well, remember when we had this and did this? Like, that's what we're doing. Like, that's right. We're aligned. Let's go.
Yeah. And I think that was really like the intentionality behind that, like rigorous planning. Look, we weren't so obsessed with the plan that we wouldn't adapt or change, right? But to your point, it was, okay, we're all on the same sheet of music. You know your instrument, what you need to play and when you need to come in and what notes you need to hit now. So we shouldn't have to all have these conversations over and over again. When COVID hit and we all had to go remote, that saved us. Having the plan is what saved us.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, if we had all gone remote at that point in time, and we were a 10-month-old startup with no customers, okay, running out of cash.
Yeah.
And then now we're all on Teams and Zoom. That plan was what allowed everybody to go, okay, I know you're going to go remote and I'll see you when I see you.
Yeah.
But you have your to-dos, you have your action items, and now, it's about staying accountable and having fun, obviously, as we're doing all of it.
Yeah.
But and that's just stayed now part of our culture to this very day.
Yeah. And it reminds me of a quote. I can't remember the title of the book or the guy's name, but founder of Netflix. He has these 10 principles that he ends his book with, that he lives by professionally. And one of them that's always stuck with me is strong opinions loosely held. And so again, like if you have this goal, and again, like the tactics could change, it's never going to be linear. There's going to be ups and downs, backs and forths. But if you're strongly, if you know what you're talking about, but things can change of how to get there, you need to be flexible. Because again, if there's someone's gonna be that rigid, like, no, 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 this is how we're gonna do it. Be like, well, we can't do it like that
Right.
anymore, and something's changed, so we gotta like pivot and adapt. Not pivoting, adapting the long term goal, but how we get there. I think that's where a lot of people in general, whether it's professionally or other, can get kind of stuck
Yeah.
because there's like this rigidness in plan. I mean, my brain goes straight to like professional plans and development and growth. And so many people get so stuck on of like, oh, well, I want to be an accountant. So I'm going to go get my undergrad in accounting. I'm going to go get my Mac. I'm going to go pass the test. And then I'm going to go work for a big four accounting firm. And then I'm like, yada, yada, yada. And it gets so structured. It's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like, don't miss the forest for the trees,
Right.
because like even in what I do for work, I mean, like RevOps,
Yeah.
that's a very new topic. Like I couldn't have gone to school and been like, I want to do RevOps. Like, what do you mean RevOps? Like, what are
Yeah.
you talking about? Like, what are you okay? And so I think it's interesting to, as long as you can, again, keep an eye forward and be strategically focused on what you need to accomplish, but again, be flexible on how you get there. I mean, that's where, I mean, some of the best companies succeed and thrive.
Yeah. Adaptability.
Number one.
Yeah.
So I imagine, so, okay, so pre-COVID, you guys are headquartered in Virginia.
Mhm.
I mean, because again, close to DC. I mean, walk me through this process of being like, all right, I think Utah is where we want to go. I mean, how did that conversation go and how to get started?
So we looked at a number of places. We looked at Seattle, Austin, Denver, Salt Lake. Ultimately, the decision for Salt Lake was both personal and in the best interest of the company. The startup scene here and the talent base, um, I think, is tremendous, and the support from you mentioned Blake and Pelion at the start of the call. The VCs that are here are very founder friendly, supportive of the state and what the state is trying to accomplish. Um, the talent here is very well developed and world class. I think there is originally there was that thinking that like this would also be like some cost savings, which is not the case. And I think that's testament to the talent and the fact that Utah is on the map from a tech perspective. The other thing was we had this idea that we could probably pull a number of people out of DC and bring them back. Some really talented folks working in the national security space, and that proved to be true very fast.
And was that mostly, because again, we alluded to it, and we don't have to get into the details of why there's so many people from Utah in DC, but were these people who were also looking for a route back to Utah, or these people who had no idea and were willing to take a risk on it?
It was more the former. Like they were working on some really exciting things in DC that you just can't really do anywhere else. And when we relocated out here and set up the operation, and I flagged to some of the folks in the network that we had this operation going and we were building it out, they jumped at it and said, "Hey, look, I'm going to leave the government after 15 years and jump into this with both feet, and then move the family out here and get that itch on the career side,
Mm-hmm.
but now also have a bit more of a work-life balance and something that works for their family, which I that's true for me as well. I have two small children now. I have my in-laws are here. My family's up in Idaho. It's wonderful when you can put those pieces of the puzzle together. And for most of my career, I did not have that
Mm-hmm.
balance.
And I think that's one thing that gets lost in translation a lot with Utah. I mean, Silicon Slopes. I mean, just like Utah culture in general. Because I remember when I was in Seattle working in finance, there was a lot of, I mean, just grind, 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 do what you need to. And I remember one of my bosses, he was like, I know I'm a bad dad, but I
Yeah.
know what I'm doing now is more important for them than being there right now. And I remember hearing that. I was like,
I'm not sure that's correct.
yeah. And I was like, and again, I was like, yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah.
And, and again, like, cause like when you work in an organization, especially like in some sort of professional services, you realize your growth is to get to where they are. And if you look at them and you hear things like that, you're like, that's not right.
Yeah.
And I mean, especially comparing people that had, I mean, worked in New York and San Francisco and all of like the major hubs, there is that culture. I mean, just grind, do what you need to do, everything else. I mean, there isn't this social value in saying, oh, I went home and like played a board game with my family and then put the kids to bed. And then me and my wife sat on the couch on the bed while I tinkered at emails while we joked about stuff. Like
Right.
that isn't part of the culture.
Yeah.
And then I moved here and it was so interesting to see such a strong juxtaposition to it all where I'm like, oh, like hear this leadership talking about their great relationships with their wife and their family, how they do want to go spend time with them. And when it's time to go, it's time to go. And they prioritize their time effectively instead of everything is the highest of priorities. Yeah. And I think there's a big breath of fresh air for people that do move here for professional reasons to be like, oh, well, oh, you don't need me to be available all the time. You don't need me to always have my green Slack light on or feel like if I'm not responding in 5 seconds or present at the office that I'm not a valuable employee. And I think that's something that, I mean, has been harder with remote culture because you can be sucked into the computer all day if you don't have a way to step away. And I think that's something that's going to continually resonate with people. I mean, not only just because like Utah outdoors, quality of life, diversity of life, et cetera, but also just the culture that brings people together. And there's also one interesting point that's become more and more apparent in not only in like the business entrepreneur and tech side of things in Utah, but across everything that I've experienced in the podcast from art and nightlife and everything in between is this kind of theme of the original thought of Salt Lake of Deseret in this community. There's so much collaboration. There's so much help. Like you hear of competitors, I mean, working together almost and like helping each other because they realize that they can both grow together and be successful. And there's a lot of like, I mean, mind melts and a lot of mind just collaboration across the field of being able to support each other that isn't found in a lot of places. And I don't think a lot of people realize how much value that provides for everyone.
So I call it kind of like the what if conversation. I have a lot more of those in Utah. What if we could do this? What if we started that? And that's to your point about culture and that collaboration. That's something I think is just like innate in Utahns. And it is different than the rest of the country. I think it is unique. I don't mean to like over tout it or things like that, but I have found it to be very vibrant here and very creative, right? And especially when you now have this university system, you have a state government that is managing the finances of the state very effectively and then reinvesting that into different segments of the economy, actually outlining a vision. Well, I mean, what a concept, right? And then to have what's going on in Silicon Slopes and the Defense Tech Hub, it just creates this wonderful dynamic of possibility. And I think at the end of the day, like that's what people want. They want potential. They want the ability to say, this is an idea I have. It may not work, but there's a network here of people who believe in me and are willing to give it a go. And I see that playing out, as you mentioned, across the board here, whether it's the tech scene, whether it's somebody who wants to write a book, start a shop, a bakery. I've just found Utah to be very industrious and people who look at it as a way of like fulfillment. That process and that struggle to achieve that dream or that potential is part of the whole journey.
Yeah.
And that was not quite the experience I had in DC. And I'm thrilled to be a part of it now here and contributing in our own way.
Yeah, that was one thing that always bugged me about DC because I'd always, I mean, go out and meet people and like everybody, especially in the summers or if you're interning, it is a whole social world that's so fun. But it's always like the first question everybody asks is, so what do you do?
Yeah.
How can you be of value to me in
Right.
all of this? And if I were to say, like, oh, I'm a server, they probably I'll be like, oh, where are you going? You're going to get a drink? I'll get like, see ya, you know?
Yeah.
And where here, I don't try, and I personally trying to do better about not bringing work into like getting to know people better because most people are more than their job. But I think it's a place where, because again, like a lot of things that bring people here is the outside, I mean, the outdoors and the nature and the skiing. And I mean, and it's also nice because, I mean, I'm sure you can attest to this for having to travel so much. It's nice to have an international Delta hub right there. And you can get to San Francisco, you can get to DC pretty easily. You can drive 3 hours in any direction and feel like you're on a different planet.
Totally. Yeah.
And so it's nice to have like these reminders of kind of being present. And again, like those people to say like, what if, let's riff on this. Let's talk about this. Let's chat. And because again, like, I mean, again, you can attest to this is when you're starting a business, starting a project, organization, whatever it might be, it's never you alone. Like, and if you try to do it alone, you're pretty, I'm not going to say you're destined to fail because there's people that probably have and could, but I can't think of one. But you're so much more better succeed when you're using your friends, your network and collaborating compared to just trying to do it all on your own.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, so now we are here. I mean, summer 2024. I mean, looking forward for Strider. I mean, what are you most excited for? Looking forward to, with everything you're doing there.
So, I mean, there's so much going on right now. Look, the business is scaling rapidly. We're hiring quite a bit here in Utah. We just opened up an office in Tokyo.
Oh wow.
We have about 10 folks in London now. So, we're operating in 10 countries around the world. That for me is to do that in under 5 years, pretty thrilling. It's been a blitz. So we're also just kind of taking some time to look at what do we want to do over the next 5 years
Mhm.
and beyond, right? And begin putting together the structure. Um, we're in the process of closing out our Series C round to help fuel some of that expansion and growth. But ultimately, look, we've really solidified our position in the market in this new category called strategic intelligence, and are now developing new tools, new solutions, and capabilities to not only cover down on like the security piece of this nation state threat, but then you use that data and technology to help our customers also better compete,
Hmm.
right? To identify talent in these emerging frontier technologies that could contribute to their efforts. To look at different startups, right, that they could potentially collaborate with or acquire to help fuel some of that expansion. So that's an exciting kind of pivot. That's an exciting enhancement to what we're doing.
Mhm.
We're also doing quite a bit more work with government. Most of our customers are companies, so large Fortune
Oh, interesting.
500
I would have
companies.
thought the opposite.
No, I mean it's government represents maybe 20% of our business in terms of revenue. So our whole kind of thesis at Strider when we started it was industry first. I mean, this is definitely a dual use technology. So there's a government application, but our view was industry was the one who needed it the most. They're on the front lines. They're the ones being targeted by these nation states, and uh, in our system here in the U.S., the FBI and other intelligence agencies cannot provide that intelligence to companies. So there's kind of a wall there in a
Mhm.
way, and we are looking at we filled that gap, right? What we're doing is we're providing that intelligence and information to companies so that they can actually now ingest it, enrich it with their own internal data, and get a better handle on what these nation state actors are doing to steal their IP, steal their people, undermine their supply chains, right? Make sure too that if you're a semiconductor company and you get a purchase order, that you're not inadvertently selling to a front company that's controlled by the Russian military. I mean, this is a massive
Yeah.
problem. I mean, like Iranian drones are filled with Western tech. I mean, they're evading sanctions by using shell companies, offshore entities, all of that, right? So, what we're looking at is a situation where like the economy is being weaponized, and companies need those tools and visibility so that they can navigate that more effectively. And what we're seeing is like that's not slowing down, and it's not a uniquely American problem. This is happening in Japan, it's happening across Europe, it's happening in Canada. um, so we think we have a pretty important mission and role to play in addressing that problem.
Yeah, and it's nice to have not only like this economic impact and monetary value they can provide, I mean, to these companies and making sure that they're not the next victim, the next headline to come across the screen, but then also being able to be like, I am actually making a difference, and this is aligning with my values and wanting to make the world a better place, and which sometimes can come across as like very altruistic, but at the end of the day, when you can actually like measure and say like, yes, I am making the world a better place and here's how I'm doing it. I mean, what a great place to work in, and be able to provide that um, value to not only these companies but also to the people that work there, because I'm sure they love, I mean, being able to have that instead of just feeling like I'm logging into a black screen to stare at a camera with a light and then turn it off and go sit in front of a TV and make that your life. So it's amazing to see what you've done by your, I mean, own hypothesis creating and collection of information. Say, hey, I think there's an opportunity here and let's go do it, and see that validated, and see that growth, I mean, manifested in so many different ways.
Yeah, it's been a journey to say the least. Look, we have the privilege now of looking back on
Yeah,
the last five
hindsight's a
years.
beautiful thing.
It's a beautiful thing, and I'm still processing a lot of it, and what it took to get here, what it's going to take to get to that next stage. But what I'm uh, confident about is we have a dream team, and the team is really what makes the difference. That has been reiterated to me time and time again, just through my own experience
Totally.
in building this company. Is that you can have a great idea, you can have a great technology, but what makes it unique is the people. And the people that we have at Strider are world class. They're dedicated to the mission, and they also just like to have a good time.
Yeah.
So we, look, this is like we deal on a daily basis with some serious issues, um, and what we try to tell everybody is it's good to have a dark sense of humor. It's healthy,
Yes.
and it's what's going to help you through all of this stuff, right? I mean, you have to kind of take it that way.
Yeah.
Um, and that to me, for me, has been like the greatest experience of all, is getting to know these folks, and especially the ones who joined early on. I mean, I remember there was one employee we hired on our Intel team. The guy's a world class, true expert on China and economic strategy and things like that. And I said to him, "Hey, look, um, it's like jumping into a roller coaster that's on fire, and I can't tell you if like we're going to make it through. It might collapse, but you're going to have a really good, fun, hell of a ride."
Yeah.
And he was like, "I'm in." you know, and
You're like, I didn't even finish. Like, I know.
I know
I'm
he's like,
in.
"That sounds amazing. I'm in." And that was like, we needed people like that.
Yeah. I
We
mean, that
needed to find people like that who just said, "I'm in it because it's an adventure, and I got the mission itch for it, and we'll figure it out as we go."
exactly.
It's awesome.
So, I mean, Greg, outside of, I mean, Strider and everything you're doing there, I mean, what else likes to occupy your time when you close that laptop and need to decompress?
For me, it's I think what all the listeners are doing as well, like keeping kids engaged. I just taught my 6-year-old how to ride a bike, which was an amazing, fun thing, and then traveling around Utah, seeing what there is to offer in nature, heading to the mountains, uh, going to the national parks in southern Utah. We're also trying to do a bit more discovery of the restaurant and food scene here. So, hitting Ninth and Ninth and different places like that. So for us, it's just been a wonderful opportunity to orient around the family,
Hmm.
and build those relationships beyond family with the community as well, and figure out what's going on here in the state and ways we can contribute.
Yeah, no, I love that if there's one underlying word for your, I mean, entire life story, it's adventure. And you're always ready to, again, whether it's a roller coaster on fire that you're laying the tracks in front of as you need to go, or wanting to explore more of Utah, or, I mean, your childhood in Maine and having 11 acres to go run and skid some knees
Yeah.
and get a couple bruises. You've never backed away from an adventure just because there's an adventure in front of you, which is like something I always love. Like I love a good adventure, and even if I don't know how it ends, even better. Then there's a little bit of a question mark at it. So I love that that's an energy that you've always chased in so many aspects of life.
So I was listening to Green Lights by Matthew McConaughey, and if you remember, like when he gets that, he wrestles with this guy in Africa. I'm forgetting exactly where he was. I think it was Mali or something. But afterwards, I remember him saying, he goes, "Well, he asked, did I win? Did I win?" And the guy said, "It's not if you won or lose. It's did you accept the challenge." It's not if you win or lose. It's if did you accept the challenge. And I mean, that hit me hard.
Yeah.
Right. It's for me, a startup is the opportunity we have today to create and embody an idea, and we do, and then that's the capitalist model, right?
Yeah.
You can create that into a corporate vehicle, and that's actually how I view it. I view it as the corporate vehicle is the means to the end
Yeah.
of achieving this objective of creating this capability that can then be released into the wild and into the world, and that was the model that we chose to do it. But at the end of the day, it was just accepting that was the call that you had and wanting to jump in and make it real. So I couldn't be more thrilled to, as I said before, be part of the community here in Utah. Silicon Slopes has paved the way, I think, for a lot of entrepreneurs to have that confidence and to see that we can do it here.
Yeah.
And not do it, in a small way, do it in a big way. Right. I mean, like some of the companies that have come out of Silicon Slopes are just tremendous. And so it's definitely like paved that path for others. And we hope to continue to move that ball forward.
Yeah, I mean, excited to see what happens from here. And I mean, being another one of those big companies that comes out of Utah, and excited to watch it along the way and catch up with Eric at some point
Yes,
and then touch
yes.
base with him about. Well, Greg, I want to end with the two questions I always ask at the end of every episode. First, if you could have someone on the Small Lake City podcast and hear more about their story and what they're up to, who would you want to hear from?
I mean, I think I want to hear from, and maybe you've already had them on, but the owner of Thule Bakery.
That
You
is
already have them on?
No, but I
Yeah.
respect that because that's my favorite bakery.
Yes.
Like I used to live, well, my parents live kind of like Yellcrest area. Um, and then I moved in with a buddy, like, I mean, 3 blocks away from them, which is on like 13th South and 15th East. And that was my like, I mean, on Saturdays, it was always, all right, we wake up, we go get a pastry and a coffee. We
Yeah.
see like 5 people we know there, we go back.
Right.
But then also like during the week, I'm like, I need a little walk to just go take my mind off, and I'd go to Thule. So
Yeah.
brownie points for shouting out Thule. So yeah, I definitely do want to have them. And there's a lot of gratitude I need to give to
Yeah.
them.
The olive oil cake there is a slam dunk.
Yeah. 10 out of 10.
Yes. So I think just having, I mean, if whoever owns Thule could come on and share their recipe, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
give back to the people. It's what we want.
Yeah.
And then lastly, if people want to find out more about you, about Strider and what's going on, what's the best place to find information?
Yeah. So our website, striderintel.com. And look, for folks listening that are interested in geopolitics, what's happening there, there's a lot of resources. And if you just, put in a Google search or ask ChatGPT, you'll get a ton of content. But that's generally where you can find us.
Yeah. So if you want to join the army and the vision, go check out the jobs there and hear more about it. Go do there. But I mean, Greg, absolutely pleasure sitting down and chatting and hearing more. Blake was right. Great story, great people. Excited to see what you have to come. And yeah, catch up with Eric at some point, but glad we could connect.
Yeah, this has been a pleasure. Thanks so much for having me on.
No, absolutely. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of Small Lake City Podcast. Don't forget to like, follow, review, subscribe, and share this episode with your friends. And we'll catch you next week. We'll see you there.